What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 619 of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast, Hot Tags of the Week. The breakdown of the current rumors, news, stories on the gossipy side of things, the TV recap, and so on and so forth from the world of pro wrestling over the past few days. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, joined as always by Callum Wiggins.
Hello there.
And Robert E. Felice.
Booyaka, 619.
Oh, we are in 619 then. Yeah, look at that. I should have paid attention to that. I'm glad you did. So we're going to just kick you in the face for this episode. Just
all right.
Right in the face. And then frog splash you. Now, we have a couple things to talk about when it comes to the NXT versus Dynamite little mini skirmish that had gone on that became a much bigger thing after the fact. And on Twitter, I guess more than almost anything else, we got some Iron Claw to talk about. We got a lot actually to talk about for SmackDown tonight. It's one of those episodes where leading into Friday Night SmackDown, you know, a lot of times we normally end up just being like, they advertised a couple matches and it's not really worth talking about. There's a lot that's going to go down tonight, it seems, based off of the idea that this is the quote unquote season premiere. It's always weird to me that they still have season premieres when they don't really have seasons. So that's odd. But we got a new name for somebody, and we've got Ari Emmanuel talking about the things going on with TKO and Vince McMahon and Triple H in charge and Monday Night Raw not being Monday Night anymore and so on and so forth. So as we go along here and we tell you what we think about these topics, we want to know what you have to say as well. Drop your thoughts in the comments below on YouTube. And while you're over there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Make sure that you also help us out on the monetary side of things if you have the spare change to help us out in that way with the thanks button or the little join button. That'll give you access to the same stuff as the Patreon. And when it comes to the merchandise, you got Redbubble and TeePublic if you want to pick up some stickers or t-shirts or, you know, to be perfectly honest, I don't even pay attention as much about what the different merchandise options they are because they just add stuff all the time now where I'll log in, you know, every couple weeks or something and it'll be like, now you can get custom coffee pots or something. And I'm like, all right, fine, sure. I'll slap the Smark Out Moment logo on that if anybody wants to buy it or something. But if you have any suggestions for that all the time, of course, you let me know. And so on and so forth with that as well. If you need any more information, you let me know. I'll tell you, but we don't want to bog down the plugs too much. We want to get into some of these hot tags because some of them are pretty spicy this week. Let's talk about two that I think that we can kind of get out of the way relatively easily without jumping around topics too much. One of them is that Bobby Roode is supposedly no longer listed as an active superstar, but just a producer. And we might, of course, see him come back into the ring at some point. He had been gone for a long time now from injuries, and there's no indication that I can find online about how his progress is for his injury, which might indicate that maybe he is kind of hanging up his boots, or maybe it's just going to take a while and they figured he's an old enough veteran. We can get his perspective on things. And, you know, some people are really good at the producing job and some people actually are better producers than they are even wrestlers. And other people, they have struggles and they can't really do that job or they don't really want to or whatever, but he seems like he is fitting in rather well. We'll talk about another producer a little bit later, but, they also had a little thing with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa that they had been doing the NXT stuff with the Glorious bombing, and the return of that included Bobby Roode popping up out of the producer's room. So it seems like it's an indication even more so that that might be true. He might wrestle in the future, but I would be surprised if we saw him return to the roster, at least on a regular basis. How do you guys feel about this whole situation?
Bobby Roode should have headlined to WrestleMania.
Should have been a world champion too.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. He should have. The Glorious entrance was great. It's weird to think we got matches like Bobby Roode and Randy Orton for like the U.S. title at some points, and it feels like it should have been a bigger deal, but it's just one of those things. And I do hope we see him do a Royal Rumble appearance or something. But I'm glad that he's transitioning. I'm glad he's healthy. I'm glad, you know, all the usual positives that come out of a situation like this are great for him. But I was a diehard Bobby Roode fan, and feel like he should have done a little bit more.
I would say that outside of the entrance, I found Bobby Roode's entire WWE run very, very underwhelming. I think that I'd say like his in-ring stuff was pretty dull in comparison to what he'd been in Impact, and I think his character was nowhere near as strong as it had been in Impact as well. It just felt like a guy who you would feel would be perfect for WWE, and yet he just didn't fit at all. In the landscape of what NXT was becoming at that point in time, he was not the right fit for that brand. And yeah, I'm not surprised that he's been transitioned out of the in-ring stuff. Fundamentally, he just never they never wanted to position him at a certain level. So he gets to be a producer now, and that's good for him.
You guys think that it would have worked out better for him if he would have gotten into the AJ Styles route, where we talked before about the idea of like arguably Samoa Joe shouldn't have even bothered to go to NXT because he was already a well enough established name, and somebody like Styles jumped straight to the Raw roster or the SmackDown roster, whatever it was. Bobby Roode, I think, should have just gone straight to Raw or SmackDown, and maybe they would have had already the perception of he's a guy that we can do something with, more so than going through the NXT system. Even if you are an established name, it is sort of like you have to graduate your way up there, and maybe that 2 years or whatever was just enough time to miss the boat.
Yeah, I thought what he gave to NXT when they were trying to do a little bit more of we're elevating it. I understood what they were going for. I ultimately think that because of what NXT would end up being known for at the end of the day, it was probably not a fit. But man, he should. I look at Bobby Roode and I think about like our fantasy booking, for example, and that would be a guy who could arguably headline a Mania, and it didn't happen. I ultimately think that they tried to position him as a babyface, which was weird, and then things just went sideways from there. Like he was Robert Roode with a mustache for a while. Like they just couldn't help themselves. But he will always be known as, what is he, the second 24/7 champion ever?
The first was
Titus,
and then
Bobby Roode, and then R-Truth.
Was it then?
Hit him with a car or something, didn't he?
Let's see. I'll look that up in the meantime. Is that his big say-away that Robert Roode would be known as that? I don't even remember. Yeah, apparently he was.
No, I mean, I'm being an asshole, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, apparently it was Titus, then Roode, then R-Truth, then Elias, and so on and so forth.
No, I think Bobby Roode for WWE is going to be remembered as glorious guy in the NXT entrance.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he did there. I think for most wrestling fans, Bobby Roode's going to be remembered for Beer Money and his TNA run. And that shit was second to none.
So again, as I mentioned, we will talk about a different producer with our whole SmackDown stuff going on. But here's another thing that's unrelated that, we're not going to bounce around between those topics. The trailer I should say the first trailer for the Iron Claw movie came out the other day. It's an A24 production. That's the one that MJF is in, and it's led by Zac Efron and Lily James, and there's some other people that you would recognize that are character actors and stuff. But if I were to say to you like, hey, name to me your favorite 5 Holt McCallany movies, people would be like, who? And then if I showed you a picture, you'd be like, oh, he's been in 15 things or something. But I know that Rob checked it out. Callum, did you check out the trailer?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So what did you guys think about it?
I love A24 and I love pro wrestling, and I'm damn excited to see this. You're going to be in Florida in December, and I even asked you if you would be around for the movie, because I think that this movie is going to be a good time. I don't know. Like, look, I don't know what people are expecting outside the wrestling bubble, but I don't care about them. I think it's going to be a really fun movie for me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think I saw someone on Twitter sum it up best when they said it feels quite weird when wrestling is taken seriously in mainstream media. And yeah, it is a bit, because this is a really serious story. And people who aren't aware about the background of the Von Erichs and everything surrounding that family might go into that also basically considering a lot of the trailer, going into it thinking, oh, we're in for a bit of a fun wrestling spectacle, this should be a bit of a laugh, and then some of the topic matter they will almost certainly discuss in it is going to knock a few people sideways. So I think it looks like it could be a really well put together movie. I want to see how, again, I don't know the full story like cover to cover, but I know elements of it, so I want to see how, because they could go really deep in certain parts of this to see, like, there are a lot of stories out there which could make things quite harrowing in certain segments. But yes, I'm interested to see what the final product looks like.
Now, I know specifically to Callum, have you seen any other A24 productions? They're very good at tackling stuff like this. I believe they're also doing the Priscilla movie right now, aren't they? Getting out there. And
I mean, I couldn't tell you any movie that's an A24 production. I wouldn't have known if you had told me that this movie was an A24 production, because, like, really, the production company of a movie is not something that I pay much attention to.
Well, I think I saw Jordan, former Smark Women writer Jordan, say best, you need to understand this is not just Zac Efron all muscular and tights. It's a very hard-hitting movie, and I'm looking forward to the reception and the movie in general, and I can't wait to talk about it here. Probably watch it with Tony on a fan track.
Most likely they're going to be the case, yeah. A24 does a lot of horror stuff, and they do a lot of dramas that are like, I wouldn't say necessarily like experimental, but like they don't, you know what you're getting into with a Pixar movie, and you know what you're getting into with a Blumhouse picture. And A24 has kind of created this market for itself of being like serious and sometimes strange. So they did the movie Talk to Me, a horror film, which like was pretty good. Now, I'm not a big horror fan, but I thought it was pretty decent. Caroline liked it a lot. You know, she's a huge horror buff as it is, but they are responsible for The Whale, the movie of Darren Aronofsky's film with Brendan Fraser. So it's like, that's not a horror film at all, but it's, you know, serious drama in that way. And they did the Pearl movies, which are all, you know, a kind of funny horror thing, like X and whatnot. I'm pretty sure that they did Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is totally strange, you know, but they have a pretty good track record. So that makes me feel good already. And it looks like a solid film. It looks like something that we might end up afterward going into being like, all right, they kind of skipped over this, or they kind of didn't do that quite well or whatever. But I have a little bit more faith that this is going to be good, more so than something like that Wrestling with My Family was, which wasn't bad, but ultimately just wasn't great. I think that this is going to be better, and they'll probably have to do some kind of a deep dive because I'm not too familiar with a lot of aspects of that story. So I'd like to kind of learn a little bit more before that movie comes out. But so far, the reaction's been pretty good that I've seen online. It doesn't seem like people that are in the bubble or outside of the bubble are really kind of approaching it through a different lens. It's not like it's like only wrestling fans are interested in this movie, or people that are not into pro wrestling are like, oh, this seems like this is going to be a comedy, or, you know, anything along those lines. So it comes out December 22nd. I don't think that we had a release date one of the last times we were talking about this. So it'll be around, you know, for the Christmas season. And depending on when it comes out on any kind of digital release or something, we might end up doing a fan announce table or a fan tracks or something like that. So keep that in mind. Or, you know, if you see it in theaters, let us know what you think about it. let's see what we should go to next. Let's go to Ari Emmanuel and talk about some of the comments that he recently said that are, of course, there's a lot more to unpack, but there's plenty of things that who gives a shit about. We're not going to start getting into. We got a 40% increase for SmackDown and blah, blah, blah. But the couple of interesting things that he did say, more so this one block of text, I'm going to read it from Post Wrestling because they did a good job with the transcription. I would say to you, there's plenty of interest in Raw right now. I know people are like, NBC is out of the mix, and that's why it went down. I think there's 3 things that happened. 1, the reason the stock is down is they thought Raw was the best package. I saw a 40% increase, which was in line with expectations. 2, the PFL situation. And 3, probably Vince in our deal wanted to be able to put at any point in time his stock. He's 78 years old. He's been working at this for decades and decades. So I think those 3 back-to-back issues. The idea that Raw might move off of Monday night is also kind of bouncing around from this. There's also a story that's going around that Triple H is anointed fully in charge of creative and that Vince is out of the mix, and that stuff that we've seen in the past week or two could indicate that, you know, Tegan Nox is back on TV, Xia Li's on TV. We're getting a push for somebody like a Bronson Reed to go up against Gunther, and Johnny Gargano is back, and it might be an indicator of that. It might not be necessarily, could be coincidence. I do think this is all pretty interesting, and the thing that makes me kind of pop the most is the idea that it seems like it's already cutting straight to the, yeah, we don't really want to have Vince around.
I think, well, I can't comment too much on the business side of things, obviously. I think it'd be very shocking to see Raw move off of Monday nights. Just a lot of equity in that brand. I think people tune into Monday Night Raw same way they tune into like a Saturday Night Live. You know, like people know when Raw is on television.
It would take a lot, I think, to justify Raw moving from Monday, because Monday's a coveted spot on television too. And a lot of people that don't pay attention to ratings and everything, that they just sort of go, well, you can move it to any night and it really doesn't matter. You can just make it Tuesday night Raw or Wednesday night Raw or whatever. But there are things known as death slots, and, you know, something like a Thursday, it doesn't perform the same way as a Friday. Saturdays in general, for instance, are not good days to have your show. People go out on Saturday nights. So I highly doubt that we would get like Saturday Night Raw, but there's a possibility.
Saturday night's all right for fighting. Outside of that, like the Vince stuff, I don't see anything big in that. There's been the story that he might just sell his stock and be completely out for a while now. Maybe that was the overall plan. I enjoy the idea that Hunter's been anointed fully in charge of creative, but, you know, never say never until Vince is gone. And I don't like the idea of NBC out of the mix. I don't think that that's a great move. Like, I would think that NBC would throw everything at the wall to keep all of the WWE properties, because that's their most successful thing outside of whatever Dick Wolf rerun you want to run that day. Like,
to be fair, though, the way that he says it is, I know people are like, NBC is out of the mix. So that's not him saying NBC is out of the mix in getting Monday Night Raw, and that's led to, it's the perception is that NBC is out because they didn't announce Raw being with SmackDown and like NXT as like, we're getting all 3 or something. So a lot of people, I mean, even us, we were kind of like, does that mean that NBC is not interested in Raw, or does that mean that they're pitching something that WWE and Endeavor and all them are just like, yeah, fuck you, we're not going to accept that? Or, you know, because it is a little strange that they didn't just settle on a deal yet. That doesn't mean that they're out of the mix entirely.
This has no weight on Callum. Callum does not watch on USA. He doesn't watch. But, I think, just to kind of pitch to you, Callum, what do you think about the idea that they're fully behind Triple H and there's more and more of this idea that Vince is kind of just heading out full-time soon?
Well, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I mean, fundamentally, it doesn't matter to me. I stopped watching WWE back when Triple H was doing creative stuff. I'm not going to go back now that I know that he's fully back in charge. I think his stuff is pretty stale and boring for the most part, and so it doesn't really interest me, him being in charge of creative. Yeah, certain names that were on the outs when Vince was back pretty much at the helm are coming back, but they need to do a lot of character rehabilitation on a lot of them. I think that in terms of the whole Raw potentially moving to different nights, I think that you should at least open yourself up to the possibility of that happening, because you start to limit your options to potential bidders if you basically say, oh, you can only ever put this show on a Monday night. So I think that we should at least start to potentially come to terms with the possibility that they decide to switch over to another night instead. But yeah, I mean, I said it back when we spoke originally about all this NBC stuff about, I'm sure that if they had a real intention to get all 3 shows and have them part of the same network, that they would have moved heaven and earth to just try and buy the company. So I think that, yeah, so it won't surprise me at all if they move Raw and NXT end up going to, Amazon Prime or Disney or something like that instead. So yeah, I think it's one of those just wait and see situations. Maybe NBC just does come back with the final offer because they get a bit nervous about the possibility of not having Raw on the network anymore. But it's not like Raw's always been on USA. They could move it around. So yeah, it's pretty much like a much of a muchness to me, these announcements. They in the grand scheme of things, they are big, but it's not anything that I'm gonna think too much about.
So I have a question. Just because I'm admittedly uneducated about some of this stuff. If it moves to Amazon Prime, does that mean it'll be shown at a universal time for everyone? And does that mean that ratings are no longer a factor?
Kind of. So from my understanding, and if anybody knows anything differently, then obviously chime in on the comments below. Streaming things never really tell anybody what the numbers are. Like Netflix gives ideas of numbers, but they never really report specifics. And they'll say things like, Stranger Things was the most watched episode for this entire year, the premiere, or something like that. But then you're like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that 8 people watched it? Or does that mean that 250,000 people watched it at, you debuted it at 3 a.m. and people were clicking on it at 3:01? And there has to be some sort of metrics that they do with their conversion rates of how many people sign up for specific shows and then, get their package deals and do it like that for them to be able to continue and justify, funding a show like House of Cards or, it's a Game of Thrones thing or something like that, versus them just throwing random shit on there and just paying a licensing fee for something. And Raw is definitely something that they would have to approach differently than just renting out the rights for a movie, because the movie rights are just stale. It's just, you put it on there, you hope that people are interested in that being part of the catalog, and that's it. But TV shows, they tend to approach differently. And there's been a lot of hubbub over streaming stuff with Disney Plus. And I mean, we're seeing it all across the board with this idea that they're all sort of having the same crisis of shit. We're not getting people to give us more money. So let's try to throw ads in there, and then let's try to convince people to go on the ad tier by boosting up the non-ad tier at such a high rate that people aren't gonna, the whole idea of like a medium drink costs almost the same as a large, and a small is something that they can make a percentage of money on. So let's make sure that the medium is a pointless charge so that we either get them for the small or the large. I think when Raw, if it were to go to Amazon, that they would release it at just like it's on there, and rather than like air it live. But even that is kind of strange because I'm not aware of anything on Amazon that broadcasts live. I don't really.
Thursday Night Football, and they're doing pretty decent numbers.
Okay, so that is something that
they've always done. They've done Premier League football on there as well.
Okay. The only things I ever click on Prime for are like The Boys and Gen V and stuff like that. So it's like, a static show that I'll click on eventually and watch that episode. Like I'm an episode behind on Gen V probably at this point, but so that's potentially different. If they're airing that like an actual TV show, then maybe they do have a set time that they would be like broadcasting like regular TV.
Because that's kind of some of the stuff that interests me. And also I think WWE as a television powerhouse, they wouldn't be leaving TV altogether because SmackDown is going to USA. We know this, and there will be the quarterly programs on NBC. But for half of that, then move away from traditional TV, I think is a huge statement if it happens. And then there's also personally the annoyance of I got the live stuff on the one streaming platform and the catalog on the other platform. That's why I wanted it all to go to Peacock and NBC, just convenience. But no, it's exciting, and I'm interested to see where it lands because there's a lot of players, and the landscape is changing every day. You're seeing it. Tony just mentioned it. They're upping these ad-supported versions of the platforms tremendously because they want that ad money. It's no longer about, hey, you get Netflix and then you don't have commercials and it's great. Not the case anymore.
Everybody's just skipping all the shit that we've talked about for the past couple of years where it was like you used to pay for cable to not have commercials. And then commercials came to cable, so then they created Netflix and stuff. And then they created extra Netflixes. And then now they're creating Disney's like, I want my cable. and the bubble's going to keep bursting, and they're going to keep realizing that you can't fucking charge this amount of money. You can't spend $140 a year on Disney Plus when you can't buy groceries. It's just not going to happen. And they have to eat some crow eventually. So I am thinking if they are, at least from my perspective, of course, people run these numbers and they know way more information than I do. And they're, business analysts and statistic people that have way more training than I do and all that too. But from my perspective, what I would imagine is going to happen here, I think Raw stays on Monday nights no matter what. I think that they're open to the idea that it could switch off of Monday as part of the negotiations, but I'm pretty sure that they had done that before too. I think that that's just kind of one of their phrasings that they do is just like, well, if the right offer comes, then, we're not married to Monday night in the sense that something like Saturday Night Live, like you mentioned, if that were to switch other than Saturday Night Live, you need to change the name of the show. It's technically Monday Night Raw only by like colloquialism. It's just WWE Raw. So it doesn't have to be Monday nights. But it's kind of an institution, so you're risking a lot by moving that. SmackDown's moved around all fucking sorts of it. It's been pre-taped on a Tuesday, and it's been airing on a Tuesday, and it's aired on a Thursday, and it's aired on a Friday, and so they don't give a shit about that. But NXT's been Tuesday, Wednesday. They can move that around too, and I would expect we still have Monday Night Raw, and it's probably going to stay on USA. But that they might be negotiating something with Amazon and Peacock to just be like, maybe we should explore that. NXT, though, I think that there's a good chance that that could be a Peacock exclusive, or that could be maybe an Amazon Prime show.
I'm very curious to see where that all lands.
So let's keep all the SmackDown stuff together. Let's keep all the NXT and AEW stuff together and toss out one more that's on the outskirts of this. Karrion Kross is saying that he supposedly had been set up with creative pitches to work against Bray Wyatt for WrestleMania 39. And that there could have been ideas of Kross with Scarlett against Bray Wyatt and Bliss, because that would make sense to have a kind of, back and forth between those two and the women on the outside and all. And I don't really necessarily buy into it 100%. I find it hard to believe that this was something that really got off the ground, because we talked about it before. Go back in the archives if you want to check out our reactions when this was happening. They just sort of randomly had Bray Wyatt go out on an episode of SmackDown, I believe is what it was, and just go, yeah, between between Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar, whoever wins at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, I'm going to fight at WrestleMania. And we were all like, well, what the hell is that about? He's got no interaction between those two. Nothing at all. That's the most random ass thing. And then that got into our heads about, well, does that mean that Bobby Lashley beats Brock Lesnar? Because it seems like it's more likely that Bobby Lashley would go up against him. No, Brock Lesnar is the bigger deal, so Brock has to win because Brock and Bray Wyatt is a bigger match than Bobby Lashley and Bray Wyatt. And then it just sort of became, yeah, it's going to be the Bobby Lashley match. And then, of course, that didn't happen. And then Lashley ended up being in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal and all that. And so many people have said that, hey, Brock probably turned the idea down and whatever. Nothing at all was happening around Karrion Kross and Bray Wyatt, though. So maybe this was something that they had pitched weeks or months prior to that. Maybe this was something that Kross and Wyatt were thinking about, and then they got this note handed to them of, nope, it's Lashley and Lesnar or whatever or something. It would have been a better idea, I think, Kross versus Wyatt, rather than this random Lashley thing. If we could have gotten it, of course.
There's a lot there that changes as we go. Because if you remember, the Raw Women's Championship match at the Royal Rumble was Bliss and Belair with heavy Uncle Howdy Bray Wyatt overtones. And then Bliss goes away. She has a skin cancer scare. Like, that's okay. She gets pregnant. So maybe at that moment, at the Royal Rumble, they were like, we could do Bliss and Bray against Karrion Kross and Scarlett. That might be fun. And then as things change, because creative in WWE is fluid, it became, let's do this, which then became Lashley beats Lesnar by DQ, and we saw what happened. It wasn't tremendous, and unfortunately, Bray Wyatt is no longer with us. But I have a hard time believing that this was as solid as the write-ups of the quote would make you think.
But I don't really have much to say on this one, because it's not like anything that would involve Karrion Kross in a match or feud is nothing that I'm going to be particularly interested in or want to even consider happening. So yeah, if he was pitched to fight Bray Wyatt, I don't care. Wouldn't want to see that match. If he's pitched for any match at WrestleMania, don't care. Wouldn't want to watch that. So we can move on.
I don't know what their plan is for what to do with Karrion Kross, but they need to figure it out soon enough, because he has been just losing momentum with each passing week that they don't do anything with him. He came back and it was like, oh, okay, maybe they got this rejuvenated idea for him and maybe things can work out better than the last time. And then he just sort of did nothing. He's feuded with a couple people, but it's been like half-assed feuding. Like, he had feuded with Ray for like a month and a half and had like 2 matches with him, but then he was feuding with somebody else at the same time. So Ray was just sort of oh yeah, I got Kross in the background, but I'm also targeting this guy or something. Like, they don't seem to be really wanting to dedicate any kind of manpower towards the Karrion Kross story. And that's not giving me a whole lot of faith that anything great's coming up in his future. But I mean, he wants to grow his hair out to look like 98 Undertaker, I think is what he had said recently. So it's like, if that's what your focus is, then we'll see about that. But
well, we can say that Scarlett will be featured on NXT in a couple weeks.
She and Shotzi are going to be the hosts of Night 1, correct? Not both nights, it's just Night 1.
I believe it's both nights.
At least Night 1. Let's put it that way. Then we're not wrong. Yeah, Shotzi is kind of making a little bit of a play for herself as like the perpetual Halloween Havoc host, which that's cool. Yeah, down for that. We do have a lot of NXT to talk about here. We got a lot of AEW to talk about as well. Guys want to get into that, or do you think we should get into the SmackDown stuff? Maybe we'll do the AEW stuff and then all that, and then do the SmackDown stuff at the finale, since that's leading into tonight. If you are a pro wrestling fan and you have any kind of tap into this tribalism, you can't like them both kind of thing that some people have, which is stupid, then you know that NXT and AEW were head to head this week for a special episode of Dynamite. They had been bumped off of their normal Wednesday night time, so they decided to try to spice it up a little bit by calling it Title Tuesday. 2 titles on the line, which is less than they have for Battle of the Belts. But hey, okay, sure. You know, you got to give it something to try to make people go, Title Tuesday. Okay, I remember it's on a Tuesday. But that's part of the story. Another big story that is involved in this is what I'm referring to on this thumbnail and stuff as Tony Khan's meltdown. And I think the timeline of this is something we should get into, then talk about the results and then the stuff that happens after. I think that that's probably the best way that we can approach this, because heading into the week, if my memory serves me correct, WWE had announced Cody's going to be on and he's going to make an announcement. John Cena's going to be on. Asuka's going to fight Roxanne Perez. They had an Undertaker gong at the very end of those promos. And I believe that was it. There might have been like one other thing or something. But it seemed like it was just sort of...
And it was Heyman.
Oh, and Paul Heyman in the corner to offset John Cena. That's right, yeah. They didn't really seem to be doing anything else other than that. Meanwhile, AEW was like, okay, well, we've got an international championship match. We've got Edge's match against Luchasaurus. We've got Hikaru Shida against Saraya. And... Swerve match and the Hangman Adam Page match. So like they had put out a card. It seemed like it was pretty set and a good lineup. And we talked about it last week, our predictions for both of those shows and stuff. And then if I'm getting the right timeline, the next thing that happened was NXT announced the first 30 minutes of NXT are going to be commercial free. Is that right? That they did that one first? Before...
NXT announced it first. Yeah.
And then Tony Khan goes... Oh, yeah, well, you know what? We're going to get the first 30 minutes of our show free as well, if not more. And also, we're going to have a pre-show. It's going to be Eddie Kingston defending his championship against Minoru Suzuki. That's going to be on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, because they can't just, add more to that. That'd be kind of crazy to just be like, yeah, let's get an extra half an hour on network television and everything, or cable TV, not network. And then it just keeps spiraling, and it becomes more this whole thing with Tony Khan about like, I'm going to try to find where I had a list of like all these things where he was really hitting hard, not just promoting AEW is going to be on Tuesday. We have this really good lineup. Remember, everybody, we're not on Wednesday. We're on Tuesday. We really want you to tune in. It started to become more like, okay, now I'm pissed and I'm going to take shots at this. I'm going to say things less so of this is going to be one of the best shows that we've ever had, which is already kind of like, all right, you might be, kind of a little bit superfluous on that front, but also you're just touting yourself, and there's nothing bad about that. He starts getting into some of these other things where it's, I'm looking at this now, the full lineup of this. AEW Dynamite's on Tuesday this week, October 10th. You don't have to wait until Wednesday this week, and good thing too, because it's Title Tuesday, maybe the best lineup of matches we've ever had. This Tuesday, Kansas City. And it's my birthday. Which is like, all right, it's kind of cute. The idea of like, please tune in. It's my birthday. It'd be a good birthday gift. And he starts also touting numbers and saying like, Forbidden Door and Wrestle Dream currently on our best run. These short 4 shows sold great on pay-per-view. So it's very much like, no. Anybody that's complaining, we're doing great. What are you talking about? And then he starts tweeting out gifs of, okay, you want to be a dick? That we got the special 30-minute time slot or whatever. And then we got the pre-show and all that stuff.
And the overrun.
And he throws in the overrun. We're going to have an overrun as well. So it's like, well, we've got to have an extra 30 minutes and more than that or whatever. Somebody had tweeted out, let me see what their name was on there. One Mellow Soul on Twitter put out a sort of like, looking picture of Seth Rollins. And he just said, "We not watching, bucko." Tony Khan's response was a gif of Roderick Strong saying, "Who gives a fuck?"
Admittedly, that was hysterical.
Which that was the first, like, this is kind of going a little bit in the maybe you should kind of settle down sort of range. I personally loved this. I thought that this was great. Like, this was highly entertaining. So I didn't want him to stop at all. But a lot of people were like, all right, whatever. Somebody, Augustin Arcus 98 had said, if Vince McMahon said this, if Sir Vince McMahon said this, there would be many failed AEW fans crying nonstop and furious. #hypocrites. To which Tony Khan replied, if Sir Vince McMahon said this, it would be the least of his alleged misdeeds. Which is like, again,
very
hilarious. Not wrong either, but it's kind of like, all right, this is coming off a little bit desperate to kind of do these shots. And then he doubles down even more about the overrun and all that stuff to send a message to Triple H and Shawn Michaels, bald asshole.
Okay, so I'd seen the bald asshole tweet, but I do want to give some context to that because Nick Hausman, House of Wrestling, had reported Shawn Michaels and Triple H looking to send a message to Tony Khan with tonight's show. And he said, I have a message for that bald asshole. And that's funny. Again, genuinely funny stuff here, even if I was kind of like, oh, wow, he's tweeting a lot. Okay, like, genuinely funny stuff. Obviously, Curb Your Enthusiasm was very much on his
And we get into the NXT and AEW stuff. And we'll talk about like what happened on those shows too. Maybe we'll backtrack and talk about that after. But AEW loses the ratings, quote unquote, war of that night. I don't have the numbers ahead of me. Let me
921,000 for NXT to 609,000 for AEW.
Yeah, so NXT wins. And depending on your perspective, you're either the type of person who, in my mind at the very least, is rational about this, and you go, okay, well, NXT had some big names on there. That's not their normal number. AEW was not on their normal week, but they did try to put out some stuff to get people to tune in, and he was trying really hard to add extra stuff to, like, the overrun and the lead in, throwing an extra title match in there and all. So they kind of both really tried, and NXT has their loyalty thing, and NXT is still WWE and whatever, and it's AEW's top people against NXT's not top people, minus the fact that Cena and Undertaker and whatever. But Undertaker and Cena are only advertised as doing that. They're not advertised to wrestle, and there's gray elements of everything. It's not black and white. So the people that go like, NXT just is their C show and they beat the A show, and that means that WWE 100% kicked their ass. Not necessarily. And then the AEW people that are like, well, I mean, it's only because of John Cena and Undertaker, and if Dynamite was whatever, you go, well, yeah, I mean, not really. So I look at this and I go, it's kind of a wash in some ways, but yeah, NXT won, technically. And I don't think that AEW should hate themselves for it. And I don't think that WWE should be like, we are conquering the world for it or hating themselves for it. Tony Khan's not liking the responses for that, so he starts putting out stuff about like, history was made this week because Cena and Undertaker have never been on a show that didn't draw at least 1 million, and then that comes across to me as very much like, you know, that meme of the guy that's like super celebrating hard with the champagne and biting the metal, and then he's in third place.
Girl.
You know, that's kind of what it comes across to me, where it's like, yeah, well, you know what? We kind of fucked over Cena and Undertaker, didn't we? And it's all coming very much down the line of like, WWE's not talking as much about this. And the less that they talk and the more that Tony Khan talks, the more that he keeps digging a hole, the worse AEW looks to me.
So I think I have fun with this.
This is super fun.
You know, like job aside, as a person, I have a tremendous amount of fun with this because I believe that that's the fun of competition. I'm very much a fan of the Cola Wars, very much a fan of the console wars. Like, that's right up my alley.
Tell the people what you pick.
First of all, I was always the kind for the console or soda to have both, but it would be Nintendo and Pepsi, personally.
What would you pick, Ella?
PlayStation and Pepsi Max, technically. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I think this is funny. I do think that when he sent out the one yesterday about, oh well, you know, before this week, Cena and Undertaker had never been on a show with under 1 million viewers. Ha ha ha. I think 1, he's being playful at this point. 2, it does come off weird because I'm sure people aren't looking at it like that. So there was part of me that was kind of like, I wish he would kind of stop talking just so everybody else would stop talking. But then he would tweet some more, and then it makes you realize why he might be taking all of this so personal. I'll let you pick it up from there.
So he had been saying that it became a personal thing with this competition with WWE during a time frame when his mother was sick and she was, the Mayo Clinic was able to sort that out, thankfully, and all. But that was happening around the same time that WWE was, quote unquote, contract tampering, which that also is something that we've talked about before, but we don't know too much information about what exactly went down because, as far as I'm concerned, if you were to talk to somebody and say, hey, when you can talk to us, let us know because we're interested in you. As far as I can tell, that's not contract tampering. That's just letting somebody know about that. But then also, even if that is the case, if that's contract tampering, you got to imagine that the same thing happens both ways because there is no way that Jeff Hardy did not have some sort of go-between with Matt Hardy and Tony Khan. You can't convince me that there was never a discussion where Tony Khan didn't talk to other people that could talk to Jeff about the idea of coming in. He definitely did. So you can't throw stones in a glass house, you know?
So with this in particular, this is different for me because this one, it's a little more egregious on behalf of WWE, with certain things at least. William Regal had a job lined up, flat out. Like, hey, Triple H back in charge. Regal gets a job. I know that they did actively pitch Swerve on like, oh, we know you signed, but hey, can you get out of it? Like, that's a little more direct than, the kind of stuff you were talking about where it's like, well, let us know because we're interested in you. Kind of like they might have done with Jade, for example. That's a little more direct.
Yeah.
And I can see taking that, especially when Regal left, he had talked about the situation with his mother being a very big driving force. So if it became personal then, that would also explain the comments from earlier this year about like, I think I got along better with the other regime. And, fuck this regime kind of.
Yeah.
When Triple H had first taken over. So that explains a little bit more of why we're here. So that was at least nice to get some color.
So this whole Tony Khan tweeting stuff, I'd say the vast majority of them I just find funny, and I think that people's interpretation that this makes AEW look bad is bollocks. Like, yeah, he's the owner of the company, and so maybe he should take a step back from his phone every now and again and just let things play out. But also, AEW has kind of built up a reputation as being a challenger brand for WWE, so their fan base will eat up the fact that he's going after the forerunners of WWE, and actually, you know, being an aggressor. I say an aggressor, being a shit stirrer in this context, rather than just being silent, just saying, "Oh, okay, we're going to play nice. We're just going to go about our business." You know, some people will say that it is like punching upwards, and WWE wasn't taking the approach. And you know, that is some people's perspective, and optics are important. But I think for the most part, it added a bit of entertainment value to this.
It definitely did.
Thing. So yeah. So I don't. So just as an outside observer, it doesn't affect me, and it's not like I'm going to, you know, stop watching. Oh God, these guys are small fry because they're going after, like, you know, a company that's been around for about 60 years and has like got millions upon like billions of dollars backing them and all that other stuff. And it's a case of, well, it's like, you know, he's just having a bit of fun. Also, like, saying that I was opening my eyes to when I listened to Brian Alvarez talk about it, is that there is method to the madness, or at least from his perspective, and it does make sense in that when Tony Khan tweets this more inflammatory stuff, it gets a lot of eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then after he would do that, he would then almost immediately tweet about a match or the event or something else that's happening about the show. So maybe from his perspective, he's thinking, okay, I tweet this thing out, that's going to get a lot of people looking at my profile, and then I'm immediately tweeting about this extra match we're putting on or this new stipulation, and then maybe people will get interested about it. So I can understand it from not just both him probably also taking personal offense to a lot of this stuff. I'd say the one that immediately sticks in my craw a bit is the John Cena and Undertaker tweet, because that does just feel like sour grapes. But the other stuff I can see is like being either fun or being from a serious position. Like we know that contract tampering happened because Swerve Strickland admitted to it on his podcast that they tried to tap him up when he was under contract with AEW. So, and I think it's quite obvious from that point of view. And again, I'm not saying that I'm the expert by any stretch of imagination, but I think people's views on what contact tampering is and what it isn't is pretty askew. So, like, I think say like, oh, that's not contact tampering if you just call someone up and ask them when they're going to be next available, or do you want to move over, or anything along those lines. But yeah, that kind of is. It depends on what's in the contract. So, like, it all depends on what's in your contract, and if your contract specifically states that you shouldn't be in contact with any other rival promotions or anything along those lines, then yeah, if someone does just call you up and you have that conversation, then that is breaching the contract. So,
but then that's when I go, that's both sides would be guilty then, because there's no way the Jeff Hardy thing was just sort of...
You don't know that.
I mean, we don't know for sure, but I feel like there's almost no way that it wouldn't make any sense to me that he would just be like, let me go get myself fired and whatever.
He could have spoken to Matt about it.
Yeah, but that's an indirect way of contract tampering, and they could have, you know, it's kind of like, okay,
it's not if Tony Khan did not, or anybody from an official capacity that could do something with AEW, like didn't reach out to Jeff Hardy and talk to him about it. Matt could just say, oh, Jeff's going to be out of his contract soon, and then as soon as his contract does end, Tony Khan's then immediately on the phone with him. As long as that's happening, then that's in no way contact tampering. Whereas Triple H directly calling Swerve Strickland and saying, hey, are you happy with AEW? We'd love to take you back, is contract tampering.
I mean, there's levels to any of that depending on what happened. But I think anything that goes in that range, you have to kind of know exactly what's in the contracts. You have to know exactly what went down, and you have to take it with a grain of salt that everybody fucking lies. Everybody lies about everything. So it's like, there's no angel in business. And, whether it's people that use, an offshore bank account to not report all their income so that they pay less in income tax, or they do the whole, Oprah's like, hey, we promise to give you millions of dollars if you give all those millions, and then we'll say that we gave that through our thing. So that's, like, for instance, for anybody that doesn't know this, do not give money at a grocery store or something. If they say, do you want to, donate to the Red Cross or something, don't do it. And it sounds awful, but the reason why you shouldn't do it is because you are paying Walmart or whatever it might be for their donation. They write it off on their taxes. And all you're doing with that little, you order something on Grubhub and it says, do you want to round up to donate to like some kids fund? All you're doing is you're covering that for them. You're not actually adding to what they've done. If they pledge $10 million, they're spending $10 million, you're reimbursing them for it. So do not do it. Send the money directly to them and then they have to pay for it separately. You know what I mean? So people do that kind of shit all the time. And that's where I go like, all right, well, I just assume AEW and WWE and all these other companies, they're doing whatever they can to get around it. Hey, when you get a chance, Edge or Christian, can you talk to Edge? Like that kind of thing. But I don't know. I would find it hard to believe that WWE would be doing anything during a time frame that Tony Khan's mom's in a situation because they're looking at that as like, he's distracted, so let's do it now or something. No, that would be pretty fucking awful if they did.
No, I don't think that's the case as well, but I think that Tony Khan, I don't think even Tony Khan sees that as the direct thing, but I think he's obviously conflating that stuff, which everyone has the, like,
people tend to do that, yeah.
But yeah, which is essentially, it was a very emotional time for him, and then, like, dealing with his own, like, personal situation, and then on top of that, having to deal with, like, wrestlers coming up to him and saying, hey, Triple H is, well, not necessarily just Triple H, but, like, people from WWE have been on the phone asking if I'm happy here, or like they've been like asking about my contract or anything of that ilk. So yeah, it's not a case of WWE purposely timed that to when his mum was in the hospital to try and like then start reaching out to all those things. But he's going to not view it as a direct attack, but basically say, wow, they're going after my talent at a time which is already like super stressful for me. So yeah, I'm really pissed off about that. And who knows if he then at some point reached out to them and say, hey, this is a really bad time for me right now. Do you mind just leaving off? Like, we know how each other operates or anything like that, but like seriously not right now.
Yeah.
And then who knows what happens at that point onwards, or whether it's just a case that it's just, the awful timing of it, and it'll like it then colors his view on the company even more. I mean, you can kind of tell that, like, from that moment on, especially just with the contract tampering stuff, there was a change in Khan's attitude to WWE. He used to be just very, okay, we're obviously like a challenger brand, but we're like, and we'll still make like a few jokes here and there about WWE, but we're not going to do that seriously. I think there's ever since that time when like there were that whole rumors circulating about people going after AEW contracted talent now that Triple H was back in charge and was trying to get back a lot of the people that had been released in the last couple of years. I think from that moment on, he's been a bit more agitated working with them or talking about them or thinking about them. And so this,
right, because before then, like, you saw Jericho and Big Show and all them make video appearances on Raw for like the thank you Cena thing, and then that all just sort of stopped and it became way more contentious.
I mean, even the vernacular and the way they would phrase things was more like, I'm a big fan of a lot of things that we've seen in WWE. We're going to put our own spin on something. And then it sort of became like, nah, fuck those guys. So it's like, which is infinitely entertaining. And like, there are elements of both NXT and AEW from this week that I thought were really fun and interesting. But this whole Tony Khan situation, I was like, yeah, I'm actually more glued to this than I am on anything else, because that's fun. And I want to see this shit happen all the time now. Not that, like, if he's in like a crazed state or something like that, I obviously don't wish that on him. But like, just from a fan perspective, the idea of either side just being like, nah, fuck you then, and fuck you, and whatever. And like, there was the thing at the beginning of NXT this week where we'll talk about the Cody Rhodes announcement, but like, I guess it was Ilya Dragunov's birthday as well. So it was like, oh, and happy birthday, whatever. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that's a shot, you know? Like,
talk about the actual ratings themselves. And again, like you said, there shouldn't really be too much hand waving about any of that stuff, really, one way or the other. And the tribalism aspect of it is just like absolutely insane, and don't really want to be too much a part of it. But my take on it is that, yes, NXT won very comfortably in the end, at least from the total viewership standpoint. I think the 18-49 demo was a lot closer, but like nothing, still enough of a gap. But I think at the end, like, nothing was actually proven at the end of this. And it's not even just the point of, you know, AEW was on the wrong night. They usually would be, and so they were going to get some kind of drop off anyway. And WWE fans are pretty like loyal and diehard anyway. And NXT has been growing in viewership a lot recently, especially with some of the top names already on it or like making appearances. But like WWE hasn't proved anything, or like, you know, if there was that sending a message malarkey about, like, because they didn't really send a message, because yeah, it's not all just about like you have, you know, John Cena, Cody Rhodes, The Undertaker, LA Knight, Becky Lynch, Asuka are all on this show. It's like a case of, well, it's not really NXT beating AEW then, is it? Because this wasn't a normal. No, it doesn't say like it wasn't a normal episode of NXT. It wasn't a normal episode of AEW either. But it's a case of, well, why didn't you try and if you'd beaten them? Well, put it this way: if you'd have gone with a more standard episode of NXT, still a special episode of NXT, like with titles being defended, big matches happening, and all of your top stars that you have at NXT just going and having like the best matches you can put on, and you just say, okay, and that beats AEW, then you go, oh, look,
our C show beats your best that you can have to offer. Yeah,
beats the best you can have to offer, and then you can be a bit more braggadocious about it. Or if you lose, you just do what the Triple H up thing, which is, hey, good, they beat our developmental show, and that's like, and then you can move past it. So either way, WWE can claim a victory. And this one, they can claim a victory. I'm not going to say it's a hollow victory, but it's a case of, well, pretty much everyone going into this show knew once you'd announced all that stuff that you were going to win. So what have you proven otherwise? Like, I mean, to be fair, I would have been confident of NXT winning regardless of putting all those names on. So, or I would have at least put, if I was a betting man, I would have put the money on NXT winning regardless of having all those big names on it. So I don't know why they didn't just do it. It would have been a bigger victory in people's eyes that just the typical NXT roster beat AEW's best. But, you know, that's up to them. They wanted to hedge their bets, and AEW tried to challenge that as best they could, and they ended up losing. And so I'm sure like the guys with like WWE or some superstar's name in their Twitter header is going to be like going crazy about this for months and months to come. But yeah, I think most of us can just look at it and say, like, hey, it was just a thing that happened at night, and it was actually quite fun just seeing all the interactions and being able to feel like a really small example of like what people were feeling all the time during the Monday Night Wars. You know, and that's the most I think people should take out of it. And you got two pretty fun shows out of it as well. So
before we get into the shows themselves, any other takeaways you have on this, Rob, for the Twitter reactions and stuff?
No, I think it's fun when it's there, but I think they showed why they're not on the same night anymore. I did enjoy having Wednesday off, so I do wish they were on the same night. I'll say that.
You know, it actually was a little bit easier for me too. I mean, I typically record Dynamite and I watch it either at like 10 o'clock or so. I mean, for me, it's easy because I don't have to do the coverage on Smark at the moment. Dallas takes coverage for that. So I usually I'll use that 8 to 10 spot to watch like an episode of The Changeling with my wife or something instead. And then I'll be like, all right, I'll watch Dynamite when you go to bed. I got to do the NXT coverage. So that I have to watch live, but that was pretty easy for me to overall be like, all right, I'll watch NXT and then I'll watch Dynamite after that. And then on Wednesday, I was like, I'll watch 2 episodes of The Changeling instead.
I do want to talk about that because it was nice to have a weeknight that didn't have a wrestling show on it. And I do want all wrestling promotions to consider that for 5 seconds. But that's
my Thursday because I'm like, fuck Thursdays. I ain't watching these other things. I'm not watching Ring of Honor. I'm not watching Impact. Screw you guys.
I mean, that's more of an out of sight, out of mind approach.
Oh, it's very much so. Because obviously, if I wanted to be 100% tapped into everything, I'd be watching everything. But then I reach a point where I go, nah. Just nah. But let's get into the shows themselves. There actually was quite a bit that happened on both those episodes. Obviously, we don't need to break down every single little thing. We don't need to dive deep into Wardlow having another powerbomb walk into the crowd thing with Matt Sydal or something. But we also don't need to go into too much when the Tyler Bate and the Brawling Brutes beat Gallus. Okay, who cares? Pub rules match. There was a spot where they jammed a dart into one guy's hand. Cool. As far as the NXT side of things goes, though, started off with Cody Rhodes announcing 3 things. He announced the men's NXT breakout tournament will be happening. He didn't say when.
That's cool. That was unexpected.
The Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic will also be happening, and he didn't say when. And that he would.
No, he did say when for the men.
He did?
He said as soon as the women's tournament is over, the men's tournament.
Okay. So you can assume, at the very least with that in mind, that the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic isn't happening for a few weeks. Maybe not even necessarily in 2023. Because the women's breakout tournament is not really set to end. I mean, they have, they got the graphic out now with the bracket. They're not really pushing that along too quickly. It's not like they are having matches on Level Up just to kind of get through it in 2 weeks. So far, they've had 2 matches. We never did Carmen Petrovic against Jada Parker. We haven't done Ariana Grace against Jakar Jackson. So if they're essentially doing 1 match per week and that's it, we're talking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks worth of that just for the women's breakout tournament. And they might double up next week and do the Grace Jakar Jackson Parker Petrovic match and do kind of speed it along. But I don't think that we're going to get through the women's breakout tournament, the men's breakout tournament, and then start, let alone finish, the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic by the end of the year. It's probably going to start at the beginning of the year. Maybe they have that set to be like the finale is going to be at whatever event that they do in like January or February or so. Maybe the Tag Team Classic will actually end with Stand and Deliver, for all we know. But it is coming back. And the other announcement he announced was that he was the special guest general manager for the night. And they had a whole segment setting up stuff for later, and they came back around it with a couple more times. But first, before we get into those, just general projections going forward. Who do you think wins the men's breakout tournament, and who do you think wins the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic?
Pillman. I think Pillman wins the breakout tournament because I don't know anyone else that would fit the mold for that right now.
I fully disagree. I think King wins.
Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. It's going to be interesting to see how many new teams they throw in there. Do we see the Gruesome Twosome? We see, because right now, if you ask me, I would tell you Out the Mud probably wins because they're new. But it'll be interesting to see who's part of it. Maybe there's some main roster team shows up. Maybe DIY just re-enters the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic and wins the tournament and fights the Tag Team Championship at Stand and Deliver. Who knows?
If you go on the wrestling news, you'll see I posted a thing that breaks down all the potential possible teams, all the potential possible breakout people, and breaking that down into, way more than a lot of people probably would be interested in some ways. But there's a very good chance that main roster people do pop up on there for the tag team tournament, at least, because they want to throw those people in there. So, you put Pretty Deadly in there or something, it wouldn't shock me. I think Trick and Mello win the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, because that is something that they have tended to do a lot, where they put two people together and they tell the story that the two of them make it through the Tag Team Classic, and then that's kind of one of their big storyline hooks of the whole thing. And that could be how they lose the tag title shot and the reason why they split finally. So I'm going to go them, and I'm going to go Pillman / King. Any predictions jumping forward for that, Callum?
I mean, your predictions seem like they make the most logical sense to go with those. So yeah, King wins the breakout tournament, and then Mello and Trick sounds like a good pairing to win the tag titles, win the tag classic, and then challenge for the tag titles. And
that's, of course, if it goes way too far in the future where they've already done the split or something, then maybe Tony D and Stacks aren't even champions, and there's a lot to unpack when it comes to that, but they bothered to have Cody announce it. So, it's coming at some point, or at least that's the current plan. So we'll track that more in the future. But we had a couple other matches here and there, a couple other segments to talk about here. Asuka beat Roxanne, so she kept up her winning streak, which makes perfect sense. And they did a bunch of...
Didn't even click with me, I'm going to be honest with you, until they said Asuka's never lost in NXT after she won. And I was like, oh, that's right. Because... the NXT Asuka is not the main roster. Asuka.
Right.
I was kind of thinking maybe Roxanne could win until they said that.
They had a little thing backstage afterward where everybody was just kind of nervously going up to Asuka to say hello. And Blair Davenport spoke in Japanese, and Tiffany Stratton cut the line and whatever. And, they kind of played into some of that stuff. They had an interesting little thing where Tegan Knox came over to Lyra Valkyria to say, she knows now what she needs to do to beat Becky Lynch. So can you just wait to have your title match? Which Lyra's like, fuck no, you're fucking dumb. I'm not getting rid of my title shot. You already lost, bitch. And it was like, yeah, all right, that's good. So I don't know if they're going to head down a Tegan Knox heel turn route, but we've seen this story play out like that before. So might have to add Tegan Knox turning heel to my predictions around that Survivor Series time.
I think this stuff was really good. Women, I think NXT books the women probably most strongly out of any major American brand right now. That's not Impact. I did say major.
We're gonna get a bada bing, bada boom battle royal.
That's fantastic. Cody Rhodes yelling "Gabagoo" was one of the funniest things I've seen.
Oh, it's funny that at the beginning of the episode, the crowd's going yeet, 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 yeet.
Yeah, they're bringing the yeet back around.
Yeah.
Or Sammy was having fun with the yeet. Cody is now. I think it's a good time.
So bada boom, bada bing, bada boom. I don't forget which one they did. Should be bada bing, bada boom. Battle Royal next week is going to be determining the number one contenders for Stacks and Tony D. Nobody stands out to me. Wouldn't shock me if almost any of the teams win.
I really think Lothario should get a shot. They didn't get a one-on-one shot. They got a four-way.
You got to watch out, though. The more that you say I didn't get a one-on-one shot, the more likely you might be gone. Look what happened to Mustafa Ali.
That is true.
They did a little Cena Braun Breaker thing, mostly just to hype up later on. Baron Corbin wants to have a title shot against Dragunov, which Cody Rhodes was like, oh, you totally deserve to potentially get one, but so does the winner of Breaker and Carmelo Hayes, and so does Dijak. So there's going to be a triple threat next week to determine Dijak's or Dragunov's new challenger for Halloween Havoc, which you could go with Dijak, you could go with Corbin, or you could go with the one who actually did win. Carmelo Hayes was able to beat Braun Breaker in the main event. And we'll come back around to that in a minute too. But I'm going to say Baron Corbin pulls that off and he wins.
I'd rather Corbin get it here than get it at Deadline. Because I love Baron Corbin. I think he's fantastic. WWE does not, and I don't feel like a 2-month program of maybe it's Baron Corbin, because you know it's not. So do it at Halloween Havoc.
Come to think of it, though, it wouldn't shock me if they go with Dijak just for that sake, because Corbin is a bigger name for Deadline. There was a weird segment here where Nathan Fraser was hanging around Axiom, Brooks Jensen, Josh Briggs, Dante Chen, and Tatum Paxley. Like, what does this group have in common? And he was just like, hey, Dom, you shouldn't treat people poorly. And Dom's like, who the fuck are you? And Rhea's like, well, he's not a champion, so he's a nobody. And I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy then, you know? Like, I know you're supposed to think of it more as like, oh, Dom and Rhea, what jerks. And I'm like, no, they have every right to be like, yeah, you can just fuck off.
You really do just enjoy the assholes. I think that's the thing with you. Like, it was a weird segment, mostly because of who was all hanging around. He makes sense as the next challenger, logically.
Hey, somebody Dom can beat.
He's also got ties to Seth Rollins. You can tie into the main roster.
He does?
He was trained by him.
Ah, shit. I didn't know that. On the Black and... What's it called?
Black and Brave?
I was going to say Black and Mild. They still own a coffee shop, don't they? It's Rollins and Cesaro own a coffee shop that's like tied into that.
I think they do, actually, yeah.
I guess that's like black and with a little bit of cream or something. Data, Trick Williams, John Cena, Carmelo Hayes thing backstage. Dragunov beat Dominic Mysterio. They led the whole big thing with that. Bouncing around here to see what else was happening. JC Jane was messing around with Chase University for a little bit. Paul Heyman was talking about how Braun Breaker's got more potential than Ricker Scott Steiner. Brian Pillman Jr. actually showed up on screen more so than he had done before and cut a promo about how his dad died when he was only 4, so he doesn't really know his dad, and he doesn't want people to think of Brian Pillman when they see his face, so he's going to go by the name of the guy who actually did raise him, which is King. And we know by the trademarks, Lexis King is going to be his name. There's worse names, but it's still just, I wish he was Brian Pillman Jr.
So, I was down with the promo because I was surprised at how they took it in a different direction. I do hear that maybe the stepfather wasn't the best. So people are a bit
oh, that's weird.
Iffy on the name choice there. But I know that the Lexis is because he had a sister that actually was getting in the business and then passed away. So her name was, Alexis.
Oh,
so he's taking the name for
maybe
her.
she might have even wanted to go by that name.
That's really cool that they're gonna tie all that stuff together. I'm interested. Pillman didn't get a lot of mic time in AEW. It's going to be interesting to see how they develop that character. I also want to backtrack a little bit because you talked about Braun Breaker and Heyman. I thought that segment was great. I thought I could see for 5 seconds that pairing being something that they explore further. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that Paul Heyman also spoke to Ava. A lot of second generation love on this NXT, which is pretty cool.
That was an NXT Anonymous spy job. We still don't know who NXT Anonymous is supposed to be, right?
Nope.
It's anonymous. I guess makes sense. The only other thing to talk about was the whole setup at the end where Braun Breaker grabbed a mic, said he's the only real badass in WWE, whether he won or lost, and that prompted The Undertaker to come out. And he had the whole American Badass thing going on, choke slammed him, said, you might be great and all that, but not today. And that he's the biggest badass. So that was the Undertaker spot. For anybody that's wondering.
Which is exactly what I knew it would be. I was like, okay, he's gonna go through the guy who called himself a badass. I thought it was a really good episode. I thought it was a really strong episode. I don't like that you were so dismissive of the Ava segment. I think that's gonna lead to a lot more. Joe Gacy did tell her to find another family. Luckily for her, she's got a very famous one.
I'm dismissive of it because I could see them just doing that for the sake of the tease and not actually following through, or even just if she does pop up, she's not good, so she's not going to really affect anything from, man, now we got this great new addition to the main roster or something. I could just see her being like there.
I mean, she's not good in between the ropes, but she's a great addition to the story. We gotta finish that goddamn story. Needs to be finished.
That's the linchpin for Cody Rhodes. It's Ava.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about. Yeah, but I thought it was a really fun episode. Callum, did you see any highlights at all that stuck out to you?
No, I didn't watch any of NXT.
Okay, I thought you might have seen a clip or two. Yeah, let's get into Dynamite then.
Dynamite had their fair share of some good segments too. We got, just to run down quick match results of some of those things. Powerhouse Hobbs beat Chris Jericho. The Wardlow thing happened, I mentioned before. We had what we were basically talking about with Jay White, Hangman Page, Swerve Strickland, and Bryan Danielson match of, makes more sense for Bryan Danielson to win and for Jay White to win and all. We'll talk a little bit more about the Jay White MJF thing. Come back around to that. It started off with that pre-show thing. Eddie Kingston retained over Minoru Suzuki. We definitely want to mention that had happened. We got 2 title changes. Those are pretty big. And
yeah.
I would say my biggest takeaways when it came to the Dynamite thing are the 2 title changes and the MJF segment. What about you guys?
Well, Adam Copeland wrestled. That was nice.
Yeah, he beat Luchasaurus, but to me that nothing really happened there that shocked me. Or
the end of it set something up. And I think the Bryan Danielson Swerve match was phenomenal. And I think the MJF thing was the biggest talking point for not the right reasons. But I would say, yeah, title changes, MJF and Danielson beating Swerve and coming out later to save Edge.
I think Donut isn't as big as the main stuff that we'll talk about, but should go on record is Hobbs squashing Chris Jericho. He beat him pretty mercilessly for about 5 to 10 minutes. It was not a back and forth affair. It was very, very one-sided, and I think now they're going on at least the hope is that this is a renewed and very focused push on Hobbs as a destroyer for the Don Callis family. And yeah, I want to just continue to appreciate Jericho, the worker, because he puts loads of guys over. And everyone just argues that he just takes TV time for himself, and yet he just gets beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten over and over again. And yet people think, he ruins people's careers, and he just all the focus is on himself.
So I want to have a little discussion about that, because the reason I didn't bring up Hobbs as a major point, because to me, it will all be in the follow through, because you can beat Jericho, as Callum pointed out, a lot of people have, but sometimes the follow through isn't there. So I'm hoping that it will be for Hobbs. And I also want to appreciate Jericho the worker, because I feel like this is the only podcast where I can do so, because I think a lot of the talk with Jericho now is people have their conceptions and they're not wavering. And I think they're missing out on the fact that Jericho is still performing at a very high level at this stage in his career, and appreciate that while it's here, because can't go for much longer. You know what I mean? So I also thank you for allowing me to say that, because it's true. Jericho is doing great stuff, and it should be appreciated.
Oh, also kind of tangentially, but cool thing, the picture of Saraya and Edge and Danielson about the whole
I was gonna talk about that. Yeah, that was
them being like, hey, you know, all of us were forced to retire, and look at that, we're wrestling again. It's like, yeah, it's awesome.
That is awesome. They deserve it. They're all wrestling at relatively the same pace as well. Like, you know, Bryan arguably doing some of his best stuff. So good for all of them.
So let's talk about that MJF segment. He's got a lot of flack for this, especially with the whole Israeli Palestinian conflict that's going on right now. The idea being you shouldn't make a story about Jews being persecuted and being discriminated against and all during this time frame, and then the other side of the argument, well, why not? You can talk about almost everything, and that's, you know, he's telling a story here and trying to take what his reality was and make that into part of a story and all. I can see both sides of the argument.
I'm gonna just say that regardless of the conflict that's currently ongoing, I don't think people would have liked this. I think the same people didn't like it, even if you remove the current conflict, they're still gonna not like it because it's, even with MJF signing off on it, it's too lowbrow. Stop me if you think I'm wrong, but there are too many. Go ahead.
So this is the focal point of MJF's character. He's mentioned it like on at least 2, if not more, promo segments. This is the fundamental basis of his character. Is this quarters incident? This is what made him who he is. He said it. Yeah, he said it multiple times. This incident and being targeted by that coloured his entire perception of the world and forced him to get tough and to not trust anyone or not be attached to anyone until obviously the most recent stuff with Adam Cole. So yeah, this is a personal story for him, and people, I know optics are a thing, and this whole tragedy that's happening in Israel and Gaza is not the ideal time to do this. So yes, the timing is very, very bad, but this is a personal story for MJF. It's certainly not lowbrow because it is the entire basis of his character is this story. And also the quarters thing that Juice Robinson brings up is also intrinsic to his character, because multiple times in matches he has hit someone in the head with a stack of quarters. Like, that is part of his character, and he is using that to target a very individual incident that happened to MJF. So yes, the timing is not perfect, but this is not a lowbrow or like focusing on that approach. This is a very deep. This is Jay White and his crew preying on the most vulnerable moment of MJF's psyche and utilizing it to try and get him off of his game. So I think that it's actually quite nuanced.
I agree with you. What I was saying is, I think the people on social media who complained would have not liked this being brought up whatsoever, because regardless of it being something he's talked about, they wouldn't like the idea that it's,
just black and white, just do not touch anything like that.
That's what I'm getting at, is that I think those people would not have seen exactly what Callum just laid out.
I think people need to sometimes question about what they want bad guys to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes. For that matter, I think a lot of people really need to take a step back and wonder whether or not they're actually offended about some things, or if they are just offended about the idea behind something and they want to like be upset. Not to say that they can't be, because you can be upset about anything, you can be offended about anything. Obviously, whether or not it applies to you is, there's different weights to things. Like, I personally am not able to talk about something like, if something's going on in South Africa, because it's like I have no connection to that whatsoever, so I can't say like to anybody you shouldn't be upset about that. But like, I don't know, maybe watch the rest of the show, and when that segment comes on, tune out, because then that way you can send a message to them that that's the thing that you're upset about, instead of being like, AEW has lost me entirely as a customer now. I'm never going to pay attention to anything else they've ever done because this thing's offensive. And I don't know. I mean, by that rationale, shouldn't you be upset about the Swerve story?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's the big thing about that as well is a case of, again, this is a personal story about this part of MJF's character. And it's a case of, if the end result was that Juice Robinson just beats the shit out of him with the stack of quarters and leaves him in a bloody heap, and and then every single week afterwards he just keeps knocking him out with the stack of quarters, and he keeps losing and he keeps getting beaten up and he ends up failing, then yeah, that is a really terrible, shitty story that you shouldn't be telling. But we all know MJF's going to beat the shit out of Juice Robinson and stand victorious over it.
Hopefully he uses the weapon against him. I think, and honestly, it's so clear that MJF wants to do this.
I think it matters to him that he wants this to be a positive story of like overcoming the type of bullying that he suffered. Yeah. So yeah, I personally don't have an issue with this, but then again, I'm not Jewish and I'm not part of that community, so I don't know if people want to take offense to it, they're more than welcome to. Again, and I'm not trying to position this as saying like you shouldn't be taking offense to it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But like personally, I think that it's actually a good story to tell, and I think it's adding a lot of gravitas to this feud, which I think is desperately needed after so much of this bro chat shows stuff. Like MJF was getting very unserious, and now this is finally got his focus back where he's at his best. So that's, I agree. That for me is the positive out of this, is that he's finally taking a feud seriously, and we've finally got a feud that's focused on, wanting to be the world champion.
I completely agree. And I think they're the perfect real scumbags because at this point, to call it what it is, MJF is like full babyface, and I think that they're a really good heel group for him to work against. And yeah, I mean, I'll say this, I didn't love it, but I myself need to take a step back and wonder how much of that didn't I love because I know that the discourse is going to follow. And that's the part that irritates me. But like, I think it's good for the character. And it's there's the meme now of MJF always has the villain origin story with everybody, but like, these are real things. And whatever it is, MJF tells real stories about his experiences. And I think this will be a good one.
Let's talk about those title changes. First up, Jon Moxley was supposed to go up against Rey Fenix, and this continuation of this international championship is just, we had this big, long, great run with Orange Cassidy. He drops it to Moxley. Moxley gets injured. He drops it to Phoenix in a fiasco of a match situation of what's going on there. Phoenix is all banged up, so he's going to drop it back to Moxley, who's not cleared to compete. So let's have Orange Cassidy come in and win the title from Rey Fenix. I hope this doesn't end with Jon Moxley beating Orange Cassidy and coming back around to that, because I think that at this point you need to pivot and you need to do something else. I'd rather somebody else beat Orange Cassidy and Moxley beat that person.
I apologize in advance. It will.
That's so lame to me if they just do that, because then it's like, why not just fucking hand him the title?
Well, the thing that, like, Mox wasn't supposed to lose it. And I, especially when it's done for reasons and it's done sporadically like this, I think the trade-off isn't too bad. Like, I don't mind, hey, wow, new champion, because we're on the other fucking channel. Roman Reigns is champion for like 1,200 days. And, some of that is just stale. And I understand the weight of making championships mean more. But now you're telling the story of it's a very competitive scene, and can Cassidy hold on to the belt, or will he fall short to Jon Moxley again?
See, I'd rather it be like Claudio beats Cassidy, or say, looking at the roster right now, like Cassidy loses it to. Actually, there's nobody that really like stands out to me right at this moment, especially because I don't think he should drop it next week. But like, I don't know. Say Cassidy loses it a couple weeks from now, or maybe even a couple of months from now, depending on when Moxley's going to be cleared to compete against like Nick Wayne, and then Nick Wayne loses it to Moxley. I just don't want to see, okay, and then we come back around and Moxley beats Cassidy again, because the only story that we can tell is, I mean, at least we got the belt back on Moxley, and let's just do the Cassidy match again. I think if you're in a position like this, you need to try a little harder.
Well, I also think that we're going to see a really cool story told where Orange Cassidy is going to want to cut that same pace. You know, he's going to be I'm not defending the title, no. Like, no, I'm not losing again. And you tell that story of his personality changing. There's a great tweet, I can't remember the person, I apologize, that showed the differences between Cassidy's first title win and his second, where this time he's just obsessed with the title. Whereas before he was like, whatever, and now he's like, this gives me purpose, and I barely acknowledge my friends who are out there with me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't think the biggest story is like when Moxley's going to get that rematch or when he's going to potentially win the title back. I think the big story is what this means for Cassidy's character, which I think would gone in a bit of a weird direction after him dropping the title in the first place. But now you've got a really good opportunity with these bizarre circumstances that it might just fall into your lap of doing a bit of a twist in Cassidy's character. As Rob says, that tweet that came out of showing the first title celebration, which was just him looking at the crowd and feeling like he acknowledged that he finally made it after always being considered that he never would, and celebrating with best friends and all that other great stuff, was just like completely counteracting what his victory in this match was, which he won pretty quickly and beat the shit out of Phoenix to do so. Like Phoenix was hurt pretty badly and probably could have been beaten even sooner, but Cassidy had to make sure that he would get the pin. And then him standing in the ring, just staring at the title, not acknowledging the friends around him, not acknowledging the fans at all, just absolutely obsessed with the title in his hands. I think we're going to see a Gollum character develop here. Like, this is a guy who wants that title, who after losing that title now doesn't want to ever let it go again. I think the real smart decision, or at least initial decision to go with this, is you have the match between Moxley and Cassidy at Full Gear, and Cassidy beats him.
Yeah, that's like what I want to see. Especially if he, not that I want him to turn heel, but especially if he does something that's a little like desperate to kind of retain it.
I don't think he should turn permanently heel. I think he should be slightly heel while holding this title,
like teetering that edge, kind of.
Yeah, I think just taking slightly more desperate measures, or just a win at all cost mentality. And what I would do is, you can tell another little story about this, just use these circumstances to your advantage, and basically have Full Gear comes up, you have Cassidy defend the title a few times in the meantime, but you show that slightly more heelish desperation to win. And then you have his match against Moxley at Full Gear, you have Cassidy win, and then you build up to the rubber match at Winter is Coming, or something like that. And then you can go either way. You can either reaffirm Cassidy as the champion, or you have Moxley win, but then at least Cassidy's had another substantial, meaningful reign for his character. Even if it isn't as long as the first reign, it's meaningful for his character to have that title reign, and then you can make something of it, and still then revert back to Moxley being the guy holding the title. You know, have a Texas Death Match or something like that to finish it off.
Actually, I like that wrinkle of get to the rubber match, but I also think that he definitely needs to refuse to defend this title. He'd say, no, I was the fightingest champion. I'm not, no. He could do it in his Orange Cassidy way, but He has to be very definitive, like, no,
I think
not defending.
I think that's difficult just because I don't think, and again, he's proven me wrong at every single turn of Orange Cassidy's career that he can. If you say he can't do something, he ends up doing it. But I would struggle to believe that people would want him to turn fully heel, and that's the refusal to defend your title is a heel move. I think he can still do like small heelish things in his matches, but you should still always be towing the line of him. He's not a full blown heel. As soon as he says that he's not defending the title, he's full blown heel. So I think you need to.
There's a way to do it because, like, you're telling the opposite story right now with Max, where Max is like, "All right, I actually wrestled like twice in one show, and I've been wrestling every week. I'm taking 2 weeks off." You know what I mean? Something akin to that, but in like an Orange Cassidy spin, because I think you need to tell the story of like his self-worth is now in that title. Whereas he was used to be whatever about everything. Now he cares about something. It's like you said, it's like the, Gollum, my precious. He needs to do that. And I think you only get there by refusing to cut the same pace that you did. He doesn't have to outright refuse to defend, but definitely he can't go on the same tear that he did.
I mean, they can get away with Orange Cassidy's character where they could have a segment where somebody's like, "Oh yeah, how about you put that belt up for grabs tonight?" And then he just goes, "Nah," and walks away. Like, people would be like, "Ah, it's funny." And then they can kind of play into that a little bit and have it be like, "Well, I mean, you haven't actually, like, why haven't you done that?" And he can, again, play into the fun element and be like, "Yeah, I'm tired. I don't want to do it today," and stuff. And then it could get to the point where he has to, and
then eventually somebody calls him out like, "Wait, this isn't just you being whatever. You're not defending."
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see him have a match with Hook over the title as well at some point. And being the fact that they're a team, and Hook's the one that got him this opportunity. If you'd watched the
the setup for that,
so yeah, I could definitely see them end up having a match as well, and maybe cause a few fractures there. But yeah, I think this is a fun story, and I think they're making the best out of a really unfortunate set of circumstances.
But when it comes to Hikaru Shida beating Saraya, that kind of took me by surprise because I figured, okay, well, the Moxley thing going into it, well, just assumed, well, all right, the Moxley title change wasn't supposed to happen, so they're just going to switch it back to him, and that's the end of it. And probably Hikaru Shida is going to lose, and Saraya retains, and they just have a title match for the sake of it. But they give it back to Shida again. She is now a 3-time champion, and
first ever.
My gut instinct was to immediately go, "Oh, she's transitional, and she's going to lose that to Toni Storm."
No,
I kind of hope that's not the case, but obviously there's a very high possibility because Shida, since her first reign, has had another reign where she was transitional, so she could be another transitional one. I don't want to see that because and I'm probably going against the grain here, but I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of how silly the characters become. It started obviously a little bit silly and like over the top, but she still kind of wrestled seriously. Now she's wrestling like a joke, and I think that stupid silent film segment that she had on
they lost
show
me
as
on
well.
that one.
That sucked. Okay, I'm glad that you guys weren't loving that because I thought that was stupid.
Well, they've like it's one of those things that I think, as Joel Lanza describes it, is like they've become a subtlety hammer company in certain aspects, which is something that you've always gone with WWE, where they have some little wrinkle of somebody's character that's a little bit funny or gets a bit of traction, and then just hammer it home. The same way that like Daniel Garcia has to do the dance pretty much every second in his matches now.
Yeah,
it's like you play it a little bit like. Be a bit clever about it rather than just going, haha, she's silent movie star, she do silent movie now, and then just like hammer it home that she's a silent movie star, she's timeless Toni Storm, hammer, and and the fact that Roderick Strong has to shout Adam every 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Like, those segments have gotten to the point where I don't even really watch them, to be honest.
It's just like stop like go back to being like do bits and pieces of it, but be I don't know, subtle about it, but be a bit more restrained about it. Find more clever ways of it coming up. So yeah, I think the Toni Storm character is going to go on a bit of a journey now. I think that there's speculation about a faction being built around her, with like Mariah May coming in at some point, hopefully. But I think in the meantime, you need to just go somewhat serious with Hikaru Shida and take it. I think that the long-term plan should be to get the belt back on Jamie Hayter when she's back. I don't know who's the person that she beats for the title. Toni Storm would somewhat make sense as the person that took it off of her in the first place. But like pretty much up until that point, then you could have a good reign with Shida as champion and give her the actual reign that she should have had. Well, that she should have had the first time around if people would have been around the place to watch her do it. So, I'm not going to hold my breath because it does have the air of a transitional reign. But then again, Soraya's ended up being a transitional reign because she just went from Shida back to Shida. Like, I think it's as obvious now as anything that Saraya won the title because it was Wembley and that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was something that we had speculated before. Was like, let's see what happens with this. And
now Shida was feuding with Baker, and they kind of dropped that for a minute. But I wonder if they pick that up again. I know Baker had previously stated that she didn't want to be champion again, but if that changes, I'd like to see new women get a shot as well. But I think right now it might be best to play to your strengths. Toni Storm, unfortunately, if this week is any indication, might no longer be one of those strengths. I'd like to see Riho get another shot at it. I want to see them actually try again, because I think people were too hard on that first few months because they just didn't understand what they were being given. So I'd like to see that try again.
There's also the like looming presence of Mercedes Moné as well. That's if and when she inevitably joins AEW, how long is it going to be until she's holding the title? You would imagine not too long. But it depends on what sort of deal she would have with AEW if she does end up signing. But she is still contracted to New Japan as well.
Yeah, but I mean, if and when she does pop up, she's getting that belt. Like, they'd be stupid not to give it to her. And yeah, maybe that is the plan, is to just have her beat Shida when they can get her. And Shida's there as like, not the John Cena or whatever, but like this reliable person you can always give the belt to, and she can hold it and rack up a number of title runs and kind of take care of it that way.
I think that because it probably makes sense to bring Mercedes in as a heel. It seems that it fits her character usually the best. And then, but to be honest, I'm seeing a lot of positive signs in the women's division, which is obviously, you don't want to get too locked into because they burn you so many times through that. But this whole Sky Blue's clearly turning heel and is joining Julia Hart's faction.
Yeah.
So there's character growth there. I think that they've also teased signs that Willow might be turning as well with that, and I think that it would be a good story to tell, is like her conflicting, potentially turning, not turning. Like maybe just tell the story that Willow has like the purest heart of anybody in AEW, and so she just can't be turned by Julia Hart. But yeah, so there is some character development happening all over the place. There's some good stuff happening in Ring of Honor still with Athena and Billy Stark. So I just want Athena to be on the quote unquote main roster now, because I think it's taken long enough. She's doing great work in Ring of Honor, but that ship is kind of sailed. Put her on the actual show that people are watching.
Listen, she's carrying Ring of Honor. They lose her, they lose. I real quick. I don't want to watch Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor is. It's seriously like, why is this not on YouTube? Why is it behind a paywall? Make that part make sense to me. That part I'm 100% serious about. Make it make sense. Because why is this show behind a $10 paywall?
I think it's not really the show's behind a $10 paywall, but then you're also getting access to all the Ring of Honor archives and stuff like that as well. So I understand the reason. I understand the reason why they have a separate Ring of Honor club for it. They might as well try and make money off this thing as well. Like, if you don't want to pay for it, or you don't want to watch it, then that's totally up to you.
Yeah, I think the catalog is great. I'm just saying, like, your mainline show as it is, being behind the paywall, I don't think it's beneficial to them.
No, they probably should be doing something to get, like, if they were to make it free, or at least make some episodes free, they'd get more eyeballs on it and maybe, like, get more fans to it. Because I think they've tried to pepper in, well, as we've seen, they try and pepper in Ring of Honor stuff on the main shows, but I don't know what effect it's having. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me to say, like, subscribers have gone up X-fold since they started introducing some Ring of Honor people on TV. But I just want to see the best people on the main TV shows, and Athena's one of the best women's workers in the world at the moment, so she should be on either Collision or Dynamite and Rampage, rather than just being confined to Ring of Honor. So, but there are some positive signs. They seem to be going in somewhat the right direction, but who knows when that's going to change.
Arguably, Athena should be the AEW Women's Champion, doing her stuff, and then Ring of Honor should be messing around with, I don't know,
the younger upstarts.
Sky Blue as champion, or Julia Hart as champion, or messing around with somebody that they can kind of not have to put as much emphasis on, because hey, that's, like, you don't want to call it this, but it's their NXT.
But then again, NXT has Becky Lynch as the women's champion. So.
It's their NXT level up, brother. Like, it's level up. No, seriously, like, I have big issues with the way that they present Ring of Honor, but I also agree with Cal, and I think that there are positive signs in the women's division. I just hope that the consistency is there.
So, gun to your head, right now, who beats Shida?
Mercedes Moné.
Thunder Rosa.
Forgot about Rosa. I'm going to go Toni Storm. So, 3 different options there. And when Baker wins it, we're all going to go, okay,
I'll be the only one celebrating, and everybody else will groan.
Well, hold on. I do have Baker on my team for the women's mock draft thing, which, for anybody that's wondering, that's going to be coming up soon. We already did the mock draft for that this week. We'll be doing the matchmaker side of it, talking about the pay-per-view that we can break down, which we've made changes to our rosters out of the mock draft, which is kind of interesting. And we'll explain that when it comes around to it. But yeah, there's been a couple little tweaks to that. I think actually all 3 of us made changes, didn't we? I know at least Calum and I did. Did you change anybody?
I didn't solidify any changes yet. I did think about picking up somebody that you dropped.
Yeah, we need to talk about that, because if you're not picking her up, I want to pick her up. So
yeah,
that's let us know who you think that might be in the comments. Ooh, yeah. Mystery. Oh. All right, so let's get into SmackDown for tonight. Round out these hot tags with actually quite a bit, to be honest. It's funny enough. Now, a lot of this is stuff that we
saw something pop up before we get into SmackDown.
That was another breaking thing.
We want to get into this report that it's from Fightful, that Fightful Select has learned WWE has been planning to have Randy Orton back by Survivor Series. So, could change some things. We could have Randy Orton back. We've got some kind of a date. And I've missed Randy Orton, so I'm glad that he's healthy and able to do a little bit more.
Hoping that we got some good stuff coming up in the future with him for sure. I'm glad to see that he is on that recovery to return, instead of it just being like, yeah, the update is it's still not all that good, or, So the things advertised for tonight, at least as far as an official capacity is concerned, Pretty Deadly is going to go up against Ridge Holland and Butch. I like them, but honestly, who fucking cares? Especially in comparison to some of these other things. Roman Reigns looks going to return. You know, they've milked a lot of that whole Roman Reigns returns
This
thing.
one's an actual return. He hasn't been around since SummerSlam.
It's ridiculous. John Cena's going to be there because they just
a match with Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel.
Most likely, because it doesn't seem like they're going to go with the AJ Styles one or the LA Knight one. And Triple H will make a, quote, special appearance. Now, originally they had said he'll make an announcement. And now, since then, they've been using the phrasing, make a special appearance. And if you click on the actual breakdown of the show, like the October 13th page, it just says Triple H to make a special appearance. Next week on the episode, tonight on the episode, Triple H will make a special appearance. So they are not saying that he's announcing anything, but we need to start getting into some of the other spoiler type things. So if you don't want to know potential spoilers of tonight,
earmuffs, children.
Earmuffs, you know.
Or at this point, just click off because, you know. Like,
mute the video and let it keep going. Give me the watch time.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
But yeah, earmuffs. A lot of these stories are coming from Boozer on Twitter. Some of them from WrestleVotes to kind of back things up. And then, of course, elsewhere, it's kind of chiming in with their thoughts and whatever.
And then Fightful, you know, a legitimate source.
Boozer's been doing really good.
Just to get that out there.
Boozer's been hitting a lot. The CM Punk stuff is still kind of, that's spotty. I don't know what's going on with that one. But even then, Houseman keeps reporting stuff and whatever. So, you know, yeah, but that's kind of, you know, it's another story for another day. But Boozer had said something about a segment being added to Fastlane that didn't end up happening. And he's teasing that might happen tonight. So that's something to pay attention to. On top of that, few ideas floating around for Triple H's announcement. No one knows yet. This is from 4 hours ago. And for context, it's 5:34 when we're recording this right now. So something might break in the meantime. No one knows yet, but it could be one of the following: War Games, a tournament, Roman's crown jewel opponent, return of show managers, new titles, only Triple H knows. Continuing on with that, there was a tease of an Eric Bischoff gif. And then the news just gets put out there. Nick Aldis is going to debut on SmackDown tonight as SmackDown's new general manager. And we can kind of assume that Adam Pearce is going to be either the Raw general manager or that Adam Pearce will be used as like the overseer overall for WWE. And that maybe some other person is going to become the Raw general manager and it'll be like Pearce over the two of them. I think the more simple explanation is probably that it's just Pearce is going to be on Raw and SmackDown's going to have Nick Aldis. WrestleVote says rumors of Nick Aldis debuting tonight on Raw as SmackDown general manager. Source states that within the last month there were discussions and ideas thrown around to see if Aldis' wife Mickie James would be interested in such a role as co-GMs. This doesn't look to be happening though.
Yeah, no shit. She's headlining Bound for Glory. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I know WWE would be so focused on not having her wrestle. Still
I don't know.
So good.
Yeah. That's always seemed weird to me that with Mickie, it's always like, yeah, we know she's great. We don't really want to use her. Why? Yeah. But then again, I've always been a Mickie fan. We know that we're going to get some Street Profits and Bobby Lashley and the LWO stuff tonight and all that kind of crap. You know, they're going to kind of bounce around with some of that stuff too. But some other teases that Boozer's put out. The trade happens tonight. Also, you might get shocked. I ask you to let it take its time to cook to conclude. Tonight, they meet for the first time. Also tonight, another meet for the first time. Meet EET, not EAT. It's not like Stacey X coming soon. Rhodes gets a huge reminiscent moment. And excuse me. He had also tweeted out Logan Paul being on the poster for Crown Jewel, which doesn't seem like Logan Paul is really going to be doing that. Seems to be Austin Theory and Grayson Waller might fight for the tag titles tonight.
Announced that. WWE announced that.
Oh, it's on the site? It wasn't last time I refreshed it. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. So Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso are going to fight Theory and Grayson Waller is added to there. Whoever is there, make sure to stay after Sammy, Ray, Lee versus Imperium post SmackDown. Big opening for tonight to be the tonight they meet for the first time. Another meet for the first time thing has been followed up with as a quote, "Have you met our newest acquisition?" So there's
been on everything.
It seems like it's Jade meeting somebody for one of them. And I would assume that's probably Flair. Is like Jade Cargill has some kind of a backstage thing with Flair. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say so. He hasn't met anybody outside of Shawn Michaels and Triple H yet, so that makes sense. But
Yeah,
also Bianca is on
that's
SmackDown, isn't she?
Oh, she's on the roster, but she hasn't been there for a while.
Yeah, I'll say Flair, but that is another option.
What do you guys think the other meet is going to be?
Sean Stasiak?
I don't know. Because if we're getting the trade, maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's like
A Raw person coming out to SmackDown.
Wait, what'd you say?
A Raw person coming out to SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, the trade is somebody from Raw is going to switch over to SmackDown because they had been talking about that with the Jey Uso thing, which I still keep thinking that it's Cody, but maybe it is somebody else for all we know. Maybe it's... Actually, I don't know. There's nobody that comes to mind that I can think of that's on Raw that could go over to SmackDown and that could be like... And then they're going to meet somebody for the first time. Because it's not like if Chad Gable comes over, it's going to be like, ooh, he's meeting Carlito for the first time, or, you know what I mean, Akira Tozawa, or anything that I can think of.
Well, do we know it's like, how have they worded this in terms of the meeting side of it? Is it not just a case of the audience meets their the new SmackDown acquisition instead of like somebody on the roster meets the new SmackDown acquisition?
For at least as far as this tease from Boozer is just tonight, ... They meet for the first time.
Okay.
And then that's the beginning of the night. Big opening for the night. So whatever it is, it's going to happen first, which may even be tied into the Triple H announcement, or it might be like, for all we know, this could be Triple H starts off the night to say Nick Aldis is whatever, and then Nick Aldis brings out the trade, and it's Nick Aldis meeting that trade person for the first time. And it might be all three kind of tied in together.
Well, to add to that, Fightful Select said the trade is set. It's not Cody Rhodes.
Huh. That's interesting. If it's not Cody.
So I saw some people speculate on Twitter, and again, I don't know if they have any inkling or anything like that, but they're suggesting the trade is Kevin Owens.
And
I definitely think it's either Kevin or Sammy.
I had said way back in the previous, first couple things that we had talked about, I was like, oh, Kevin is really mad at the idea of Jay being there. And if they sent Sammy over, then he would have all the more reason to be upset because he's just lost his tag team partner. So they still could potentially do that. But they did just have the whole he's fine with Jay thing. So unless they want to backtrack on that specifically, then...
That could also be the end of the story.
About what story? Like Kevin and Sammy teaming, period?
Kevin and Sammy.
It could be that.
And Jay and Cody. But then again, the problem with that is War Games. That feels like what they would have. But now, just spitballing, if they do have a new SmackDown GM, maybe we go back to Raw versus SmackDown with a bit more direction.
Could be. And that could be even tied into the idea I pitched before. Maybe War Games happens at Crown Jewel. And Survivor Series is Raw versus SmackDown, and they set up the idea of like, okay, we're going to get this War Games thing out of the way, and then we're going to get into some Raw versus SmackDown stuff. But even just looking at the list of the Raw and SmackDown people right now, there isn't a single thing that's coming across to me as like, if Kevin Owens were to go over there, like, oh, he meets LA Knight for the first time and it's a big deal. Or say Dominic gets traded over and he meets Carlito for the first time and it's a big deal, or, you know what I mean? Like, nothing stands out to me.
By the way, the familiar moment for Cody could be that he meets Nick Aldis because they were the main event of All In, or the NWA title match at All In.
Yeah, could be that. They do have a history together. And Aldis beat Cody to win it back, right?
Yeah. Now, I don't know about this, but do we know if Nick Aldis and Drew McIntyre have any history? I don't know if that's a major, like, oh, they meet for the first time, but could be.
Is it Aldis and Cena?
Is that a big
They
deal?
meet for the first time.
Is that a big deal?
No,
I mean, there's that history with Mickey and Cena, and I don't know, maybe there's something there. That makes more sense to me, at least, to be like an interesting thing than if it was like Shinsuke Nakamura gets sent over and he meets Carl Anderson or something. You know what I mean? Like,
you mentioned that. You mentioned that there was someone on the Crown Jewel poster that you don't think is actually going to be wrestling at the show.
Logan Paul.
Do you think it's him and Cena?
You know what? You know what?
I mean, I don't know.
Fight to promote tomorrow night.
They
show up.
Obviously, they didn't say anything about Logan Paul being there, but that doesn't mean that they.
I think there's a good chance that we got Logan Paul versus John Cena at Crown Jewel.
It very much could happen. I mean,
I could see.
I don't follow this whole fight that he's got set up. I know that like something happened with a microphone yesterday, or
open.
Yeah, but I don't know what that like entails or something. I just assume it's all bullshit because I don't trust anything anymore. But
he's in the UK at the moment, isn't he? Because the fight's happening in the UK.
That SmackDown's not in the UK, but they could take a flight, you know.
Yeah, they could fly him just in for this one-off thing and then fly him back.
If they want to get people talking, Logan Paul popping up is certainly going to trend on Twitter. Want to put it past them. And I've been saying for a while, I mean, when it comes to Logan Paul booking him for WrestleMania, the only matches that really stand out to me are Logan Paul versus Brock Lesnar or Logan Paul versus John Cena. Other than that, you're working with like, it's like bad people on the roster or anything, but like the grand scheme, if it's Logan Paul against Sheamus, like, who really cares? Or if it's Logan Paul against, I don't know.
I think that could be it, because if that's the case, then you take Logan and then take Cena out of the equation, and then
you can do the AJ Styles or Roman Reigns thing, and yeah.
I like that you're rooting for AJ. I really appreciate it.
Because they got to come back around to that. I mean, that's pretty stupid that they just did this whole, like, the OC gets attacked to set up a Styles and Cena thing, and then Cena gets a new partner with LA Knight, and Styles gets pushed away. And if they don't come back to it, then it's like, wow, you really don't give a shit about AJ Styles, do you? You know?
Yeah.
So at least as far as some of these go, come back around, circle it. Do you think that Triple H is going to announce anything other than potentially the Nick Aldis thing or the trade?
No. I think he announces Nick Aldis, who announces the trade.
I think he's going to announce that Tony Khan has a small winky.
Wouldn't that be great? That just like starts off the episode. He's just like, he does the usual like, we are NXT, we are Raw, we are SmackDown, we are WWE. Thank you for being here on the season premiere, everybody. This is going to be a great show. Tony Khan's on a small dick, and the I'm going to say he does similar to what Rob was saying. He announces, we're going to have a big change going on here. There's a new authority figure on SmackDown. Let me bring him out. Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis says, I'm going to be laying down the law, blah, 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 whatever he might say. And as my first act as SmackDown's general manager, I'm going to do this trade, and I'm going to announce to you, so-and-so is now on the SmackDown roster. And that person comes out, and then it leads to some sort of a segment later on or whatever. The meet for the first time thing, it's not striking me as anything in particular. So that might be something that's not a huge deal, but he is at least putting that in as big opening for the night. So maybe it is tied into that. I think we might get maybe Triple H announces the War Games match, either for Crown Jewel or for Survivor Series. Maybe he even announces Roman Reigns' next opponent. But I'm not expecting as much anymore now that all this is coming out. Originally, I was like, oh, is he finally going to do the SmackDown and Raw tag title split? Or finally the undisputed tag titles or new belts or something? Maybe it is. I mean, maybe they just like pack it.
Get all of it.
Like they just start off and Triple H is like, I got a lot of shit to say. Let's run down like new belts, Aldis and Tony Khan's dick and whatnot. It's kind of... It'd be a good way to get a lot of talking points and then just go into like, okay, we've got the tag belts now and fighting for them are going to be Austin Theory and Grayson Waller or something. I'm more interested in this episode of SmackDown than I was yesterday, for sure. Way more interested.
I like the idea of on-screen GMs getting back involved.
It's it's a trope that they got way too comfortable with, and then they had no fucking idea how to do anything without it. So it's like, if you need that crutch, just do it.
Yeah. Just try your best not to immediately have Aldis or Pierce be a heel.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, let it go. Like, let's get some easier storytelling.
Because the jumping through hoops type of method that they tried, where they were like, well, it's not a general manager, but it's like a commissioner, whatever, constable, this and blah, blah, blah. And well, Sonya Deville's there as like a somewhat thing, but we're not doing general managers. And it's like, no, you're doing the same thing that you're doing with the abolition of the rematch clause. And then you're like, so then we're going to have a contenders match. And it's always going to be that the person wins the contenders match to get a rematch. It's like, okay, well then it's just a fucking rematch clause. Just do that. You're not fooling.
Was a pandemic innovation, right? Where it was like, well, you're here and you have a suit and we need you to make a match. And then they just stuck with it.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that really worked out well. And
yeah,
I think Nick Aldis can do the same. I think it sucks. I think he's still got a lot of mileage in the ring. But hey, get that paycheck.
So I think that's it. Acquisition stuff. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other stuff that I think we should probably talk about. And of course, we'll figure out how this all plays out on SmackDown tonight. If there's anything in particular that we feel like we need to backtrack and talk about again next week on the hot tags or elsewhere, then we'll talk about it elsewhere. Maybe we'll even do like a small package or something. Maybe in the meantime, we'll do a Darkcast and we'll end up talking about it on that. In either fashion, somewhere down the line over the next week, we're going to come back around to the mock draft, as I mentioned before. Talk about the cards that we have created for the women's rosters that we have picked, and then the difference between trading a couple people afterward. We will come back around to another episode of the Hot Tags, and we'll get into something at the end of the month of a Mount Rushmore of spooky people in pro wrestling. And somewhere along the way, that Darkcast will pop up. So if you want to join the channel membership on YouTube or you are on Patreon, get the access to the Darkcast here. You not only will get that, you'll get access to all the previous Darkcasts. So if you want to go back and check out the archives for those other episodes where we had done some fantasy booking of giving, I think it was Money in the Bank to people each particular year, if we would have gone back in time to do that, or we've done things like the 38th Spectacular where we talked about the Simpsons being characters in WWE and so on and all. We have a lot of weird range of Darkcast material, and I think that you would enjoy it if you've never checked them out before. Pick a Poison's another option for that too. Even $1 a month, greatly appreciated, as well as the thanks button and all that stuff there. Make sure you are also going over to fanboysanonymous.com and liking and sharing and following everything that's happening on that website. And, checking out the latest fan tracks, which is Pokemon Mewtwo Returns, if you're interested in the Pokemon series, where Rob and I watched whatever that abomination was of a
bastardized version
of an extended work print version 1 thing. So, existential crisis plus mass confusion. Thank you to Guest 5 for sponsoring that. And if you go to the link tree over there on amangotree.com, you'll see links to this and Fanboys and Smark Moment and everything else that's happening under a Mango Tree, including my personal accounts at Tony Mango.
Yep, and you can follow me, Rob, at Dude Police everywhere. DudePolice.com is actually like, I was working on it yesterday. I had Tony helping a little bit, so some headway on that. And just follow me everywhere on social media at Dude Fleece. Callum?
DudeFleece.com was a pandemic creation, wasn't it?
It was, actually, yeah.
Just like Adam Pearce. You can follow me on Twitter, AricMeister14. You can check out the Power Rankings every Saturday on SmarkMoment.com, where I rank the WWE superstars based on their previous week's performances. And over on Smark Moment, you can also find the Fantasy League, where our teams are picking up points every single week as we continue to battle for the crown at WrestleMania 40. So you either find it through Smark Moment, or you can head directly to www.fantasyleague.com and find it there.
Stay tuned as well in the future for DC versus Marvel Survivor Series coming up in November, early December, sometime around that range. We're going to record it sometime in November at the very least, and it'll come up a couple weeks after that. But that's something that's on the back burner. Check out the Blueprint Project happening over in Fanboys. And that's going to do us in for the hot tags, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for your comments. If you didn't leave a comment, then I rescind that thank you. And you have to earn it by leaving a comment. That's your homework. We will see you next time, everybody. This has been another Smart Guy Moment, and we are being counted out.